I've been asked a couple times, so I'll tell you right now, I don't mind playing before speaking. If I wasn't playing this morning, I would not be down there worshiping with you. I'd be down there having a panic attack next to you. I actually don't mind speaking, but the wait to speak is the worst. Now that I'm up here, it is what it is. We'll find out if it's good together. We are in week 2 of Let Us Be Your First Church. Last week, if you didn't catch it, go online, catch the message. Greg talked about simple conversations we can have in our neighborhoods, our communities, our workplaces that might get the ball rolling as far as getting people in here to New Start, letting us be their first church. Today, we're in week 2, which could be a more contentious subject, which is judgment. Let's get judgment right. Because if we are going to be your first church, if we're going to be their first church, then we need to get judgment right, not just how to do it, but theologically why we judge. Before we go any further, a little bit of a disclaimer. This morning we are not going to be talking about salvation. We're not going to be talking about God's judgment of us, our judgment of whether someone else is right with God. We're not even going to talk about a coming judgment on the other side of the grave. This morning we're going to talk about people's behaviors, thought process, actions on this side of the grave, because it's important that you know, if this is going to be your first church, that we're not only concerned about your soul and about your salvation, which we are, and there will be sermons about that, but we are deeply concerned about your life in the here and now. We're concerned about you today. We're concerned about actions that are keeping you from a joyful, fulfilled, and peaceful life that you could be a part of. So, judgment. Are we allowed to judge? Let's look at some scripture. Go ahead and finish the sentence for me if you can, because these are pretty easy, memorable verses. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Right? Judge not. Matthew 7:1, Sermon on the Mount. I got another one from Sermon on the Mount. This one's a little more difficult. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to? Yeah, we got the plank in your own eye, the log in your own eye, right? This is another Sermon on the Mount. All right, here's another one. It might be more famous than both of those. He who is without sin, he's without sin, cast the first stone. John. It's actually this verse that got my wheels spinning about this message. I was intrigued about the number of people I heard that would throw this verse out who've probably never read John 8 or any of John or maybe any of the Bible. In fact, I was intrigued that in a world that believes very little between Genesis and Revelation, boy, they believe this. Okay, if there's a theology for the unchurched, it is don't judge. If you're without sin, may you cast the first stone. And if we're going to be people's first church, they're going to come into New Start with this mindset that of one theology of can't judge. What also I found fascinating was how effective this verse was. I mean, people cloak them, they don it like a suit of armor. So when you're about to say, hey, you probably shouldn't, they're, whoa, who are you? Are you without sin? And it's effective. It actually kind of shuts us up. Oh, maybe he's right. I'm not perfect either. So, are we allowed to judge? I want to go all the way back to the beginning, Genesis 1:26, when God makes man. Let us make mankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish and the sea, over the birds of the sky, over the livestock, and over all of the earth. Goes on in verse 28. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it. Quick theological side point. I think it's cool that right from the beginning we have us and our. When God's talking about himself, we're already talking about the Trinity right in the beginning. That's a side note, though. What this says to me is, right from the beginning, our role in this world is not just to live in it. It's not just to be a part of the creation. We're supposed to subdue it. We're supposed to rule over it. We're supposed to be God's hands and feet here on earth. We're supposed to be his emissaries. And I think it'd be pretty hard to do that if we don't have some judgment. Maybe a better word for this is discernment, so it doesn't sound so negative. We have to discern things. If we're going to rule over the world, we're going to have to discern things like when to plant and when to harvest, what's fertile land, what's not, where we should live. Of course, that's not really the point, though. We want to know, are we allowed to judge people? Are we allowed to judge their actions? Let's go to another very famous part of the Bible. People are going to come in here and they're going to remember, or they're going to know this verse. That's definitely not from my sermon. I think that's from last week. There we go. I apparently did not delete that slide. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It keeps no records of wrongs. All right, I need a little honesty here. I know you're not allowed to say this in church. Does anybody get a little sick of this verse? Because it is everywhere. It's in movies. It's in every wedding. And this is another one where people who have never read the Bible, they're pretty confident this one's accurate. Okay? And so if we're going to be your first church, I have a feeling when you come in here, you might have heard this one. And so I wanted to pick this one because, one, it's a well-known piece of scripture. But the other part is, it seems like the antithesis of judgment, right? Because love keeps no records of wrong. This is in 1 Corinthians, or in layman's terms, the first letter Paul wrote to the church in Corinth. If you read this, you might not know why he wrote this letter. So why did he? Never forget, when we're looking at a lot of the Bible, to include all of Paul's letters, Paul's motivation is not to write a book of the Bible. His motivation is to write a letter to people that ended up being a book of the Bible. That's an important but small distinction. Maybe if we look at some other verses from 1 Corinthians, we'll get to his motivation. Well, that's pretty small. We'll see how you can read it. There are divisions and quarrels amongst you. I don't say these things to shame you, but to admonish you. You've become arrogant. It's reported there's sexual immorality amongst you. Your boasting is not good. Whoa, 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 Paul. What happened to all that love is patient talk? Did he forget that only those without sin are allowed to cast the first stone? Is he sinless? Is he blameless? Has he forgotten the Sermon on the Mount? Of course not. Paul, going back to Genesis 1:26, knows that if we are going to be God's hands and feet in this world, we're going to have to make judgments not just on when to plant and when to harvest. We're going to have to make judgments on people's actions, their attitudes, their behaviors, because if we're going to kingdom build together, we're all going to have to be working together. We can't have half of us frustrating God's will. That's not going to get it done. And when we want to make people New Start their first church, let us be your first church, we want you to be a part of this. We want you to be a part of the kingdom building. But it's going to be hard to do that if you're involved in being arrogant and quarreling and sexual immorality. Paul probably knows something else, which is, let us never forget that when we say your kingdom come, your will be done, that's happening. That's happening with or without us. It's happening with or without New Start Community Church. It's happening with or without the church in Corinth. But boy, it'd be cool if more people were a part of it. It'd be great if the church in Corinth were a part of it. It'd be great if we could get people into New Start and they could be a part of it. So let's treat the rest of the morning as if in some circumstances you're allowed to judge. In some circumstances, it might be okay. Paul has shown here in 1 Corinthians that there are times when it's necessary. But what about that whole he's without sin, cast the first stone? Oh, before I get to that, I want to talk about some reasons we're afraid to judge. One of the reasons is obviously we might have our theology a little mixed up. Two, we don't want to come across as judgy. We all know that Christian. Going to church on Sunday doesn't make you automatically a Christian. You have to be superior and judgmental on the other days too. And I was looking up Christian memes about judgment, and this one I read, and it cut deep, because we all know that Christian. I was going to tell you a personal story, and I thought there's absolutely no reason to. You know who I'm talking about. That holier-than-thou, perfect, judgmental Christian. And man, it'd be painful if you were compared to that. And we're not going to be anybody's first church when we fulfill that stereotype. Now let me tell you something funny, because I'm trying not to be judgmental, right? I'm reading this, trying not to be judgmental, and then I read it, And he's missing a word. It says, you have act superior. It's supposed to say, you have to act superior. So I'm trying not to be judgmental, and I'm like, you idiot, you missed a word. So that's one reason we don't want to judge. We don't want to be judgmental. We don't want to be that Christian. When I was examining my own heart, I thought, you know what? One of the other reasons we're afraid to judge is sometimes we get sin wrong. Here's what I mean. Have you ever had a group of friends, coworkers, whatever, that were about to go out, engage in activity, go do something that sounded like a lot of fun, but you thought, I don't know, that seems a little too close to what God would not want me to do. And so you didn't do it, but you're like, but that did sound like fun, but I don't think I should be doing that. Have you ever looked at a possession of somebody else's, and maybe it's a new car, a new grill, a new whatever, and you think, man, I wish I could have that, and if I didn't tithe like that person didn't tithe, I probably could. Have you ever thought, and I've heard this is usually a thought of men, have you ever heard or thought to yourself, I am proud of my marriage. I'm proud that we are monogamous, that we are happy and fulfilled. But I know of another couple that are happy, monogamous, and fulfilled, but he had a lot of partners beforehand. That kind of sounded like fun. I mean, I'm proud that I waited, but that would have been fun too. I think in my own life, these feelings come and go. Right now we're in tax season, so you get your giving statement. Sometimes I get my giving statement, and I'm thrilled. I look at my wife, Adina, I say, look at what we did for kingdom building. Other times I'm not so thrilled. I go, look at how much money could have gone to the kids' college funds. All right? Sometimes I can look at a celebrity, maybe you're like me, you can look at a celebrity and you know everything that person's doing in their life is frustrating God's will, but you think, it'd be fun for a day. Just a day to be them, it'd be fun. And that's how we can get sin a little mixed around. We all of a sudden look at it as just rules we have to follow to be good little Christians. What is sin? I've looked up a lot of definitions over the week. I think Wikipedia had it as like any immoral act that goes against divine law, but that I think that involves more explanations of what divine law is. I like the definition of anything that keeps you from God, anything that separates you from God. So any action, behavior, attitude, thought process that separates you from God. I think it's less likely that you're pushing God away. It's probably that you're pushing away from God as he's immovable, but anything that separates you from God. What if you believed, not just said it, not just peace be with you and with you, like you actually believed this thing, that you believed that God was the source of all good. You actually believed it down in your heart, the source of all good. And when I say good, we mean the source of virtue, of love, of truth, of courage, of empathy. What would it mean to push yourself away from that? See, we were in a world of the Billy Joel theology. I'd rather laugh with the sinners than cry with the saints. The sinners are much more fun. Only the good die young. But man, when I think of God being the source of all good and what it would look like to push myself away from that, it doesn't look like fun anymore. I think it looks like that. I think metaphorically, there's people around us that are drowning and they need help. And we're walking by them and either I don't want to be judgy. I don't know why they got in there or how they got in there, but it's their business. I don't want to be judgy. Maybe we walk by them and go, it kind of looks like fun. That's not fun, right? And so we walk by them and we say nothing. I heard a podcast once, someone say, what's the opposite of love? It's not hate, it's apathy. See, love and hate can't be opposites. That's why we say things like there's a thin line between love and hate. If you've ever gone through a contentious divorce or a messy breakup, you know there's a thin line between love and hate. It's because they're motivated by the same thing, and that's the concern for someone else. In the case of hate, your concern is things go very poorly for them. In the case of love, you hope things go well for them. But in either case, you're concerned about the other person. They are, quote, renting space in your head. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is apathy. To just not care. To just walk by someone drowning and not care enough. Jesus says the highest commandment is to love your God with all your heart and your neighbor as yourself. But how can we call ourselves Christians if we don't love people enough to give them a hand? How are we going to be anybody's first church if this is the state of their life right now? Hey, but you're not supposed to cast the first stone if you're sinless, or if you have sin in your life, right? Let's look at that story. This is John 8. Jesus is teaching outside of the temple. And here's a picture of it. And I'd like to think that Jesus would have more followers at this point, mostly because at best he's controversial. Or I should say at worst he's controversial. He's got a lot of people, and controversy attracts attention. So some people will believe him, some people don't, but they're all listening to him. And he's attracted the attention of the Pharisees, and that's the person in white there. And the scriptures say the Pharisees and scribes have found an adulterous woman. They bring her to Jesus. Now, this is, when we think about this woman, she's not coming willingly. She's probably being pushed, dragged, and pulled to Jesus because they want to stone her. They want to put her to death. And so they're going to put Jesus in a theological trap. See, Jesus is saying that he has not come to overrule the law. He's a Jew. He believes in the law. But he keeps hanging out with all these sinners and keeps forgiving people. So the Pharisees are going to put him to the test. Does he believe in the law? Should she be stoned for her adultery or not? And so he finds the third option, which is, no, I believe in the law, but he who's without sin, whichever you is blameless, go ahead and throw that first stone. And I like to think about it. Imagine all the guys sitting there holding their stones, and they probably know secrets about each other. And they know each other's sins, and slowly they keep dropping the stones and walking away. We can learn a couple things from this story as far as judgment and how we judge others. First of all, does anybody think that those Pharisees are motivated by love in any kind of way? Do you think that they have a concern for that woman's well-being? I don't even think they hate her, to be honest with you. She just seems like a pawn in a greater scheme to try to get Jesus. And it's sad, because she needs help. She does look like this in her walk right now. There's nothing in the scripture that would lead you to believe that she's not adulterous. It doesn't say that's not true. And that's a serious sin. She's got brokenness in her life that's resulting of it. People around her are hurting, maybe her family. And they don't care enough. They just want to use her as a little pawn. See, in our communities, wherever you work and live, adultery has not gone extinct. There are going to be people that might confide in you that they're thinking about having an affair. Maybe they're already in one. But you got to understand, this is different. Their marriage is passionless and loveless. Or maybe they're not in an affair. Maybe you just know a guy who seems like he flirts a little too much with the receptionist. When you go out, he talks to the single ladies all the time. What should we say? Should we just walk by them, do nothing, be apathetic? We probably should do what those Pharisees should have done. What should they have done? We should look at these people and say, I know we live in a world where everything goes, or whatever makes you happy, do it. You do you. But I know from my own experience, I know from people I've met, and I know from my church, that what you're doing and what you're engaged in, and it's bringing nothing but pain and strife into your own life. It's bringing hurt and misery, the wake of destruction behind you, and I know you feel that. It's hurting your family. And I care about you too much not to say anything, or not to say nothing. I care about you too much to just walk by. I want to let you know that I'm here for you, but this behavior, you're not getting any joy out of this. This isn't going to bring peace. Be better than me. I can tell you how I act. I'm going to give you another example. If I have a neighbor who, we'll say 1 month ago, he told me, finances are a little tight. And my wife and I, it's causing some division. We're arguing about money. And then a month goes by, and then the next month, the same neighbor looks at me and says, have you seen that new F-150 Ford Lightning? I already put an order in for one. Let me tell you my first reaction. Don't be like me. My first instinct is to say nothing, or to be like, yeah, it's a pretty sweet car. I hope you give me a ride in it. Just walk by them while they're drowning. Because I don't want to be judgy. But what's worse is I am judgy, because that night I guarantee you I'm going to be laying in bed with Adina and I'm going to say, you won't believe what this idiot is thinking about buying now. Is that going to help them make New Start their first church? Is saying nothing the answer? Because we don't want to be judgy. Is that going to invite them? Is that going to attract them to New Start Community Church? Probably not. What should I say? What will you say? Maybe we live in a world where you get what you get when you can get it as soon as possible. In a world where consumerism is rampant, and we're being constantly shown the next thing, the next possession that's going to make you happy. And this goes back to last week, but I've learned from my church and people I know that thing's not going to make you happy. Oh, maybe if you got it in the right context, maybe if you got that truck out of debt. But as it is now, man, I'm afraid it's just going to lead to brokenness in your life. And it's going to cause more division between you and your wife, and you guys are going to fight more about this. And trust me, the kids notice. The kids notice when mom and dad aren't getting along. So this thing that you thought was going to be a blessing is just going to be a weight around your neck. And I don't want to see this for you. That's not what I want for you. I care about you too much. You know what? New Start Community Church, my church, has a Financial Peace University. Will help a lot of people get out of debt. You don't even have to be a Christian to attend it. You don't even have to be a part of our church. You can come here and we can help you learn how to get debt. And once I got out of debt, let me tell you personally, man, it made everything in my life a lot better. And I want to see that for you. What's going to get them to make New Start their first church? Is it going to be to say nothing? Is it going to be to walk by? Or is it going to be to lovingly correct someone? It's all about motivation. If we have stones in our hands and we're trying to persecute you, then we're not lovingly correct you, right? But what's going to get them to New Start? Let's go back to the story of Jesus and that woman, the adulterous woman, because I love how that story ends. No one ever talks about how the story ends. So everybody drops their stones and they walk away. And then Jesus looks at her and says, "Where are your accusers now?" She looks around and she says, "I have none." And then Jesus says, "Then I too don't condemn you." Condemn, sentence. He's literally saying, I too am not going to stone you to death. That is a much different thing than Jesus saying, I condone you. See, she's in a very serious situation. She's adulterous. We don't know if she's married. I'm guessing maybe she's having an affair. He says, I don't condemn you, but he does not say, but I condone you. We know he doesn't condone her because of the very next thing he says. Now go and sin no more. Oh, this world loves he who is without sin cast the first stone. That is the theology of the unchurched and some of the churched alike. But boy, when's the last time you heard someone throw out, but go and sin no more? If we are going to be your first church, then, well, let's talk about that. Why do we want them to be our first church? Or this to be their first church? Well, one, I can tell you from where I stand right now, this is a lot more fun if every seat's filled. Okay? It's a lot more fun to get to know new people. It'd be more bodies for the ministries that New Start's involved in. Oh, it's super taboo, you're not supposed to say this. The finances wouldn't hurt to have extra tithes. These are all reasons we want them in New Start Community Church, but that's not the reason. We are just one vehicle to get them to know the person of Christ. That's the goal, right? We want them in this building, and we want to help them to get to know the person of Christ. And we already know this, but they get to find it out too, and that's this. You get to come to Christ broken, sinful, hurt, angry, or sad. You get to come to him that way, and he'll accept you. But he cares about you too much to keep you that way. You get to come to him sinful, but you don't get to stay that way. Because Jesus will say to them, just like he said to you, now go and sin no more. I hope that we can be somebody's first church. I hope these conversations we can have outside of these walls and our cubicles and our schools will be impactful. We want them here. We want them to get to know the person of Christ. Thank you.